my name is Susanne Evans and welcome to the ChangeStories podcast. This is a podcast for people who are interested in creating change, whether that is within organisations or for individuals. In each podcast episode, I will have a conversation with someone about their work to share their story. Each story and conversation will provide you with ideas and inspiration for your own organisation or for you personally. To find out more about each episode, including further reading, and to share your change stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Change Stories podcast. I'm joined today by Georgi, Yankov and Nikita Mikhailov. Hello both.
Hi.
Hello.
Georgi is a senior research scientist developing traditional tests and innovative simulations scored with machine learning algorithms and with expertise in the fields of computational psychometrics and personality assessment. And Nikita is a specialist in personality psychology, working with individuals, couples and teams to increase awareness and understanding of individual differences. And they have written this brilliant book, which I love, Personality: A User's Guide. So we're going to be talking all about personality today and personality in the context of change management at some point, but lots of other interesting things. So thank you both for coming along. I'm really excited to be talking to you about all things personality. So what I really love about your book is it starts off with the kind of building blocks of personality and what it is, but then moves right into the detail and then lots of research and then some really interesting questions at the end. Can I ask you, Nikita, first of all, what motivated you or led you to write this book?
Oh, it was an argument with Georgi. That's how we met on LinkedIn. We argued about, I think it was practice should be only informed by experience of practicing with personality and coaching and team workshops, or it has to be also backed up by research. And I have a policy that whoever I argue with on LinkedIn on a professional topic, I have a call with. And because you both feel strongly about the same topic, you're just coming at it from different directions. And then we started working together, run some seminars, and a book came naturally as a result of that. But the whole thing is born out of a disagreement. I mean, that's my memory of the history. Georgi, what were your thoughts?
How we wrote it. Yes, I did reach out to you first on LinkedIn to ask you, aren't you too chaotically empirical, and wanted to vet how theoretical you are. And I think a month later, you found a publisher for a book. I've always wanted to write a book, but I needed someone to find a publisher and to just press the button. And I said, okay, we'll write a book. That's fine. I love the idea. And then he comes back with a publisher already found, and it's like, I guess I have to write it now because I signed.
Yes.
And we did it within less than a year. Editing and publishing took more than that.
Yes. And how did the process work with the two of you writing together? Because I've written a book that was published last year and I did that on my own, and that was hard. Do you think it's harder or easier to write with two people, Georgi?
We split quite well. We're not writing over each other's writing, but we edited each other. To me, it was pretty easy. Like Nikita is a specialist in the part, like the more of the feedback and the coaching side. So these chapters were his. Developing others. I had one difficulty though when I edited his part. Every second sentence started with "so." I was like, I removed and destroyed so many so's. And then our editor, he was like, oh, I like the conversational style of Nikita. So it's not such a big problem. I was like, what do you mean? It's every second sentence starts with so. That's not how I was taught English. I mean, English is not my first language. So is so colloquial. But to be frank, I think with Nikita's conversational style, it was a really nice balance because I'm a little bit more I mean, my first degree was philosophy, so I tried to go deep, and we made it engaging. That was the purpose of the book, because there are other books written on personality, but no other book is so engaging as ours, I think.
I would agree. Having read it, I think it is really engaging. I also, Nikita, have the issue of starting lots of sentences with so. I do it all the time. So
Susanne, it's not our issue, it's Georgi's issue.
is it
We're
okay?
perfectly
Fine.
happy
Yeah,
with
we're
that.
fine.
We're fine.
Like someone I know, Nikita.
Yeah, well, no
My
comment.
behaviors are not my issue. They are other people's issue, you know?
Exactly.
I almost started the sentence with so then, and I stopped myself from doing it. I know many people listening to this podcast will be familiar with the concept of personality, but one of the things that I liked at the start of the book is you go right back to basics. So you the sort of the key dimensions of it. So Nikita, if you were explaining personality to someone who didn't know what it was, how would you describe it? What are the basics?
Well, personality is why it's one of my favorite topics to talk about, is that everybody uses that word anyways. If
Mm.
you take out one's earphones and walk down the street, statistically likely, sooner or later you'll hear the word personality being mentioned. It might be in the context of relationship, like I really love their personality. It might be in context of work, my boss has a strong personality. People talk about their cats, well, my cats have very different personalities. Or it might be even about furniture, like I bought this chair because it had character. So we use this word all the time because ultimately, what's really fascinating with personality is that though we use it, it might mean different things to different people. So,
Mm.
and psychology is no different. It's like when you read a popular psychology article, how can you tell it's likely to be rubbish? It starts with the following line: psychologists agree. We don't agree on anything. And personalities, we found quite easily five, seven different definitions. And Georgi presented a very nice definition we're going to get into. But from my perspective, personality exists on several levels. So, first of all, what we often refer to personality is the self narrative we have of ourselves. So, when I'm working with a client, my first question to them is, how would you describe yourself? How would you describe your personality? And people can describe it as, collaborative. For some reason, often people use the word bubbly, which I find really curious in itself. I'm a bit argumentative, a bit of this, driven, creative, all this, a bit of a Leo, because Leo is clearly the best star sign, if you ask me. But yeah, I know, Georgi, we have our disagreements.
No,
But
my mother is Leo. I agree.
yeah, that's such a emotionally intelligent answer. But the key thing is that we have this concept of ourselves, the story we tell who we are. But in a room of even three people, as we are right now, there's three versions of each one of us. There's one how we see ourselves, and two different ones how other people interpret our behavior. And this is why it's really interesting to ask a client, what do people tend to get wrong about your personality? So when my partner goes, Nick, you're being argumentative, my response is, no, I'm not, because I think I'm being logical. So it's this different of perspective, which is really kind of key to explore. And for me, a personality model or an assessment is a framework for it. And if we go back, there's been a lot of different frameworks throughout the ages. So for me, the first personality assessment is a zodiac. It asks you one question, it gives you 12 types.
Mm.
Then you have type models, which is like 16 types. Then you have like Big Five and other models. But they're all addressing, in my mind, some need we have for our own self narrative. And then after we identify our self narrative, what's the second thing we ask? Well, I'm on a date with a Virgo, and how's that going to work out? So there's some need in us for this frameworks for both self narrative and how we relate to others. And for me, personality exists on four levels. Well, five probably. One is what we like to do. So you might be really creative, but your job doesn't allow you to be creative. So a creative hobby might be helpful. There's what you do, such as I don't particularly like to listen, but I can listen when they pay me in a coaching session. So I can do it. It's just sometimes exhausting. So you need to manage your energy, such as I do prefer to do it in the morning, and I probably have 3 1-to-1s a day because otherwise I won't listen. So we can manage what we dial up. There's what we do too much, especially under stress or when we're overworked. So when we can't manage ourselves that well. And the fourth one is who we aspire to be. because that's really interesting. Is last we mentioned the study in our book. Last year there was a study done in US, and this sample of people was asked, do you want to change your personality? And 80% of them said yes. They want to be less neurotic, so experience negative emotional affect a bit less. And they want to be more extroverted. Like the world needs more extroverts. I mean, seriously. But also, what's really important here is that it challenges these assumptions people don't want to change. In that sample, it was 80% who did.
Yes.
And why do we people want to change? Why we want to grow? Why we want to develop? And from my perspective, the key argument I want to make is that before we think how we can be more extroverted, more creative, more pragmatic, more empathetic, we actually look around and see who we can delegate this to. So, because we are social creatures and work with diversity of personality around us. So, like Georgi is highly conscientious. I'm not. And Georgi is very low on agreeableness, potentially. So, if you want to be productive as a co-author, get a co-author you're slightly afraid of.
You're piling
So,
up.
yeah.
This is recorded and it's gonna be aired to the world. I need to make a little note here. My conscientiousness is going lower because I'm growing in the hierarchy, and I'm a principal scientist, but um actually the edition that now in the UK in the US that just came out, they corrected that mistake. Um, and to grow in leadership, you need to become a little bit less conscientious. And I'm not so low agreeable. In the US, the general Hogan norm, I'm 48 percentile, so I'm in the average. But I would not share how much I am in the Bulgarian norm. Because I did take the Hogan also in Bulgarian. So compared to the Bulgarian norm, I'm a little bit lower than that average.
Yeah, I had a suspicion. But that's the key thing, that it's all about these different frameworks. So, for example, but what I was really impressed though, Georgi, you compared to the Bulgarian norm, you that low and agreeable, but the definition of personality you came up with is actually quite humanistic. That's one of the key things that took me back. How did you define personality in our book?
The self-developing itself. It sounds like a rhyme almost. A lot of self. It's a short one. I want it to be almost like mnemonic. I want it to be to sound just to sound melodic and rhythmical. Well, of course, that's just the form, but the substance is the self. Now, let's go in each of these words. We also it's in the book how I discuss each of the words of the definition, but the self has always been used as the top of us, like the top construct in our being. It's like the holder of the values and the goals in life, and it's um, the conscious realization who I am and what I stand for and what I want. Um, Developing, I think personality does change, although, I mean, if you look in meta-analysis, it's slowly, but still some changes happen. But that is average. Like, that's my problem with these. With, I'm not saying they're not right. I mean, they are. We know even the authors, we would not dare say they are not. I believe I vetted the articles in the book. We cite a lot of meta-analysis of changes. We have a whole chapter on what changes or not. But development, each individually is in charge of their life and their personality. So developing in the sense of it's yours to manage. You either manage it or not, and it will develop if anyway, even if you resign from the great responsibility and freedom to be who you want to be, then you will be what others want to be from you. This is still some sort of development, although I would say it will plateau. Um, so that is the humanistic part about the development. The self is like the rational, then you have the humanistic itself. Like now this itself, what is self itself? I mean, it's just the English language with this reflexive verb, but also it is that dialectic I wanted, where each iteration of who you are spurs the next one, and you always go to a different level. This is philosophy, you know. It's um, your former self has to burn in the fires of your new self for you to recreate yourself
Mm.
and to be able to be better for the future, because in our careers, in our lives, we know that if we just stick to who we are, that's not effective. Like, we know the difference between right and and effective. So I want people to be true to themselves, but also explore other viewpoints. Like, if if I um if I if I don't develop myself, I will, like, for example, the leader in leadership. If I do not start limiting my conscientiousness and my maybe urges to be obsessive compulsive micromanager, I'll never make it to
Mm.
a senior executive, a CEO, because I would not trust people, and I would try to do all the work myself, which I can't. You need a team and you need to trust them, you need to delegate. So you have to kill that conscientiousness. But how to kill your conscientiousness or decrease it when you have been brought up by your very conscientious parents and you have always relied on your own efforts and they have handsomely delivered to you? You always were top of the class, you got the scholarships, you work hard, you get paid well. But now suddenly, to develop yourself in your career, you have to be less of that.
Mm.
How do you change yourself just enough to be effective, but not to lose who you are? And we have a story in the book where someone wanted to be very productive and always workaholic, and they just forgot who they are. They forgot their grandparents' stories, their family traditions. They just started working so hard. They made a lot of money, but in the process, they got a divorce, and
Mm.
their children just stopped seeing them. They estranged with their children, and in the end, you retire, and you have a lot of money, and
Mm.
you have wrecked your personality. You just did not make the thread through the whole story. You lost it somewhere because you changed so much, but you let go of some of your values. So that's why we in second chapter we stress that the values is in the top. So the
Mm.
self, the values, um, they tend to not change in terms of the values, but the self, we need to be plastic in a way. That's why entrepreneurs are successful. They can reimagine themselves, like, you know, the idea of Schumpeter's and the creative destruction. You have to creatively destroy and reconstruct yourself. It's difficult. I'm not saying
Mm.
it's easy. It's difficult, and hopefully, with the use of new technologies, we can give people better feedback and just make them more aware of how they live their lives and the opportunities for changing themselves. And I'm talking too much, so I'm gonna stop here.
It's really interesting, but I think what comes out of that really strongly for me is just what you said there, Georgi, which is about the self-awareness. Because if we don't have that level of self-awareness, we can't understand what we could change to help us develop. We need to know that from somewhere, whether that's people telling us or using technology or doing some profiling or whatever. But that's the key, isn't it? That's the start of it.
Yeah, I would suggest even one step before that. I would suggest it's curiosity. Because
Yes.
whenever I run a workshop, I always say, look, by the end of today, we can be a couple of percent more curious about ourselves and others, and a couple of percent less judgmental about ourselves and others. I would count it as a success because we're so attached to the story of ourselves. And when we don't necessarily allow, when was the last time we updated who we think we are?
Mm.
And how this story is even relevant? Because the thing is that when you think I'm like this, like I don't like this, I like this, confirmation bias kicks in. When anybody provides a feedback which is different to you, that goes, they're wrong. But actually, are they really wrong, or are they just have a different perspective on their experience? And maybe you have changed. Like, how often do people actually approach somebody and say, who they known for a while, like, how do you think I changed in the last couple of years? How often do we actually do that? We need some kind of sometimes a life event that makes us reconsider who we are, instead of actually thinking, well, how am I changing? How am I adapting? And this can be both on like small level behaviors at work, such as there's a work self, home self, which is really interesting, such as often you sit down with a client and you go through the psychometrics and go, oh, can you just answer me one question? I go, what? He goes, is this my home self or my work self? To me, I just go, this is far more interesting than the psychometric itself.
Yeah.
How is it two different? And where do you feel more at home? And it's also really interesting how people start adapting themselves, as Georgi mentioned, that how we might lose our kind of sense of self. It's really fun to explore. I love the English language and the little indicators. So when people go like, when they do something they don't like for a long time, they go, a piece of me dies inside.
Yeah.
Or they have this physical reaction to this. And actually, research has shown there's potentially there. So there's been a study that, for example, when we talk about introversion, extroversion, I think it might be worth also defining it a little bit before we went into it. So what we're talking about for the less geeky of us is a big five model of personality. It's one of the models there. So in the big five, there's five aspects, which is neuroticism, so it's propensity for negative emotional affect and risk perception. Extroversion, which is need for stimuli and engagement, and also more positive as far as outlook. Openness, so this creative thinking outside the box, agreeableness, how nice you play with others, and conscientiousness, strength of drive and purpose, and grit, and all of this. As Georgi mentioned, it exists on a standard distribution, so some of us are really high in neuroticism, some of us really low, but most of us are in the middle. Same as some of us are high extroversion, some of us are more introverted, and most of us are a bit of both, ambiverted. And so we kind of look at this dynamic. So going back to extroversion, that, for example, people think, oh my God, like, introverts are so not expressive and they're so asocial and all of that. No, this is nonsense. Introverts are just extroverts with good taste. They're just more selective of what they're extroverted about and how they go about it. So, for example, you might find that some people try to be more extroverted at work. But what we found from research is for a couple of years it said, oh, if you dial up your extroversion, you'll be happier and more engaged. But the issue is, first, it's the items we measure engagement and extroversion with, such as, for example, engagement item, I'm happy at work. Extroverted item, I'm a generally happy person. And it's like, well, no surprise, those two are correlated. And so research shows, oh, if you've been more extroverted, if you socialize a little bit more, you'd be happier. Well, actually, last year a study been done, which kind of, the plot thickens. Yes, if you're ambiverted and average on that scale and you're more extroverted, yeah, you get more positive emotional affect and less negative emotional affect. So you're kind of not, you're in the profit basically emotionally. And then, but if you're super introverted to begin with and you try to be more extroverted, you actually get more negative emotional affect than positive one. It's really interesting how a lot of this leadership development fads is just trying to change people. Like, for example, try to be empathetic. I don't believe you can make people care of people they don't care about to begin with. So this kind of, you need to empathize. The thing is with low agreeable people and low on empathy, it's not they're not empathetic. They're a bit like introverts. They're very selective who they empathize with. So introverts expressing what they express with and who they socialize with. Low agreeable people who they empathize with. It's usually a small circle of people, close friends, close family, close colleagues. And to those people, you'll kill and die for. And people outside the circle, it's just that you're not mean to them. You're not antagonistic. You just don't care. Empathy is like trust. It's earned, not given. I'll give you an example. I was working with a leadership team, and the head of the team was really low on empathy, really high on logic. That high, I had to check his ears. He wasn't a Vulcan. He wasn't. But when I started describing this, I was like, he goes, I disagree with the results. And the rest of the team, yeah, he is the most empathetic leader we ever had. Start to think what sort of leaders they had before. So he explains this difference between empathy and logic and goes, oh yeah, that's me. And one of his colleagues turns to him and goes, that's really mean. And he goes, but you're part of the in-group, what are you worried about? So is that differentiation what's key?
I want to add to your point, just more of a metaphysical
Oh,
discourse. Why it is happening? Like we emphasize one trait that we want to improve, and we assume that the whole self is gonna follow. But the self, and we in the book, we several places I try to put that, emphasize that it's not just a puzzle like we say in chapter 2, but it's a fluid puzzle. It's every every piece affect the others. It's not just like, oh, dial up the empathy and you will be more effective, because it's like a balance. It's like how in chemical labs you've seen how, oh, I put more fluid here, it's the fluid up there goes up, the fluid somewhere goes down. So changing one trait might actually put strain on others or unleash third groups of
mhm.
let's call them just traits or puzzle pieces. It could be values, motivations, cognitive functions. So um, I think the problem with how we profile and assess and report to users nowadays a personality is we take this granular approach. This trait, you're high on this trait, you're low on this trait, you're high on this trait, and then you give the report to the people, and they're like, okay, so how does this work together on me? And I see a horrible lack of user friendliness and like just what Nikita calls it, utilitarian validity of our personality of assessments. Like the people who make them, they think PhDs in personality psychology would be reading them, but they are not. So I want with technology in the future to help people understand the whole holistically themselves. Like, okay, you want to be more agreeable, but that would mean sacrificing something. Like, maybe you have to be less efficient, always thinking about efficiency, how much work you're gonna do, and oh, these pesky people asking me these questions, but they won't help. You need to coach these people, so you need to be agreeable. And maybe that's how you're gonna achieve more work through them because you're gonna motivate them better. So you need to explain to the user how, by dialing up or down one trait, you can actually leverage on others what you need to sacrifice, let go, habits. And that is behavior, which personality does not talk about. But behavior in our concept of the book is just a personality in context with all the strains of the situation. So eventually people judge you by what you do, not what you think about yourself. So we need to connect personality with behavioral coaching and behavioral feedback because people want to change themselves, which means they should stop doing some things and start doing other things.
All right, and just building on that point, Georgi, it's give an example of empathy. Just because you're not empathetic to others, it shouldn't stop you from being kind in your actions and words. So actually focusing on kind behavior and being kind to others rather than putting pressure on yourself to be something you cannot be, which is to be more empathetic, could be more productive. And I'm a big fan of incremental gains, small changes, because people want to change personality. But if tomorrow you wake up with a different personality, that'd be a serious medical condition requiring immediate attention. We can only hope for little changes. So when I work with extroverted clients, I go, look, if there's one thing you take away from today, is next time you go, any questions? You count to 15 inside your head before continuing, because your default setting is any questions, good, moving on. So there was no time for questions. Same if you're highly introverted, you speak up. If you're highly extroverted, it might take effort for you to listen. whenever I read this post on LinkedIn, top 5 things that take no effort, and the first one is almost always listening. And not if you're an extrovert. It takes so much effort for me to shut up sometimes. That's why I'm limiting my one-to-ones to 3 a day, because I know I'm just going to speak at them at the fourth and the fifth one. And it is just managing this. Same with your, and also how you relate to others. So extroverts often perceive introverts as rejecting. So how does this might play out? Well, imagine you're highly introverted and some boss who flies private jet and their infinite wisdom said you're back in the office 5 days a week. And you spend your first 5 days in the office. And it's 5 o'clock on a Friday and you're heading home and somebody, aren't you coming to Beatrice's living drinks? She's leaving, she can't stand 5 days in the office. And go, okay, 2 hours, fine. So at 7 o'clock, you're going back home. You're on a commute. You're thinking of a glass of wine, a book, and maybe Prosecco. You deserve it. And a bath. But there's one variable between you and that vision of heaven. Your extroverted spouse has been working from home all day, or your flatmate, or your friend. So the moment they hear the key in the door, they go, "Arr!" And they immediately rush you at the door and you go, let's go out, let's have some fun, let's go clubbing. They need that stimuli. And you go, we're in our 40s, what do you mean clubbing? And you go, I just want to be alone right now. And the extrovert goes, do we have a problem in our relationship? And you go, oh my God, not now. And it's just how we kind of how we play off each other and how we manage our personalities, but how we can kind of change a little bit without losing the sense of ourselves. The way I kind of explain that is that people go, you should go outside your comfort zone. I go, no, you should expand your comfort zone. You can base it on your strength and what works for you, then how you can complement other people's strengths, or how we can play to each other's strengths. And when required, you can use that energy to slightly push out those boundaries and to give yourselves that flexibility. So when I'm working with highly extroverted individuals, I go like, look, next time you really want to push the boat out, and I mean like really, don't interrupt people, and after they finish talking, wait and go, is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything else? But that's like, on a special day. Because and you might be really interesting what you find out.
Is there
Or
anything else
yeah,
you want to add, Nikita, before I speak up?
I don't know, like I could go on a tirade about neuroticism,
Uh,
then we go to cultural differences.
so,
Georgi.
so you wrote wonderfully the chapter on developing, working with diverse personalities. And I want to add that self-awareness that we identified, that is the driving fuel, the fuel for the self-developing itself. It's just we coast through life on automatic gear. Like we just so many stimuli overburden our head, our receptors. The head can handle a lot of, but it's just the body has limitations, and people just don't have either time or energy or even motivation for to engage in self-awareness. How can they develop themselves without thinking about how they're perceived, or doing all the suggestions we have in the book? Well, I think this can be done through technology, and I know people think that might be sound like a technological concentration camp, like, oh, you have an agent that follows you all the time and tells you how you're perceived. Please don't be so aggressive when you speak at 9 a.m. after gym. Please do that more often. Don't do that. But the fact is, we are moving towards that, and some people would benefit, others might not. I mean, with the right settings and with the proper authorization from the user. So I authorize my AI assistant to read my mail and help me be more polite. Don't suggest anything else to me. So everyone would, it's just like your alter ego that safely gives you feedback, and it helps you enter more self-awareness more often. So
Yeah.
we can do this through technology, but we need the psychologists to get out of the theories of the 50s, 60s, 70s and start creating theories that are dynamic technology. They have take into account the realities of new technology and stop with the fear of technology. Um, because I'm afraid the data scientists, the tech moguls, might do it wrong if we do not step up now as the field of biopsychology to suggest a more humanistic way to use assessment for development.
Well, the key thing is people are already using it. So I have met people who are quite low on agreeableness who might come across harsh in their emails. They actually put their emails into ChatGPT and say, make them more empathetic. And people are already using the tech to do that, to make it a little bit easier for themselves. The question is the technology is going to be in our interests or not? And the question is how we're going to actually use it, because that is what's really interesting, because this kind of technologically enabled change of personality, behavior, and self-management.
That's not real change. They're just using it to look like it. My fear is technology might just make everything to be sweetened and superficial, but deep down people might be just so depressed
And
because
even more resentful.
and alone. And I like to go to some music festivals and meet all kinds of people there. And the kind of interactions there, if you don't have, you should not judge people. Just don't judge people, and you're gonna learn so much about yourself by interacting with so many people intensively and having good time. And I wish that to people because AI is gonna help you only if you first have that human to human awareness, feelings, and you trust you first, your emotions, your you call it sixth sense about people. You need first to know people before you use AI to know people. Otherwise, you would be pretty not sociopathic. It's like literally, yeah, you will be sociopathic. You would not know how to relate to people, but you try to manipulate them through AI to like you. But deep down in you, you will be sad.
Because actually underneath it you'd be the same, I guess,
Yeah,
unless
there's
because
nothing there. Yeah,
to create that change it's something more profound, isn't it? It's that self-awareness that we were talking about, but then creating those incremental changes that you were talking about, Nikita.
Yes, and also just being curious, as Georgi mentioned, that we make so many assumptions, we judge people before meeting them. And what's really fun is that everybody has a different vision of the world. You would have no idea how to experience it. I have no idea how to experience the world apart from being me. So a sample size of one. And isn't it fun? There's like 8 billion walking around of different visions of this world, and to find out their experience, their knowledge, and not to take it personally. So much time people spend thinking, oh my God, that person is doing this to upset me. Statistically likely, that person is not even aware you're upset. They're just doing their own thing. And you go, I don't want to raise it because I imagine they're going to be upset if I raise it with them. And sometimes you might be right, but most often they'll say, why didn't you tell me this earlier? And you go, good question. And rather than being curious about it, and also when you fall out with your psychological opposite, let's say, who do you go and talk to? Somebody who agrees with you or somebody
Yes.
who challenges your options, because it's confirmation bias. It's not just for searching on the internet to confirm your opinion, but it's also how you interact with others. So if you go to places, let's say like Canary Wharf, if you go to a bar or walk by a cafe, you'll probably hear the following conversation in different guises. And it's going to go something like this. I wasn't too harsh, was I? No. They need to learn. Plus, if they think of it tough, they have no idea how we had it in our 20s. And it's just somebody lower in agreeableness, upset potentially somebody high in agreeableness, but instead of talking to them, they talk to somebody like this. And like them, little do they know in the other cafe, a couple of tables down in the pub, the person they're upset is sitting with another person high in agreeableness to go, the sociopath we need to work with. Yeah, I know, right. And the irony is they need to work together the next day, but they're not talking to each other. And I feel that right now it's so comfortable to find information that agrees with you, agrees with your opinions. We don't debate. And this is why,
numbers,
yeah,
echo chambers. We have technology puts us in this. The algorithms just suggest content that is similar to us, and we talk to similar people. But the best gift is to get feedback that's negative feedback. So you can actually, something's not working. Let's improve myself. If you just get good feedback, good emotions, likes and, affirmation, you get addicted to it, but you're like, who you, it's like, what is happening? You're just again plateauing in that happy-go-lucky self. And how to
But
meet people. Well, this is many sociology books are written already about the collapse of the social discourse environment. We don't go to clubs anymore. Like people in the 50s, like the generation of my grandparents in Bulgaria, even my parents, we lived in small apartments, but people did not live there. They just slept there. They were always out. They were visiting their friends, work, parties, events. That's how you create community. Not just closed in your room, in your big American house with 5 rooms, with all these grand technologies, everything perfect, and you're depressed. Why do you need all these rooms? You need to live with people. You don't live with houses. You don't live with BMWs. You live with humans. And nothing that you have material you can take in your coffin to the other life. So you better live well and just enjoy the others. But so I think that we need to go back to this. And I have a bad, sorry, that's Freudian slip. I have a good feeling about the Gen Z because they have more community building, um, like intuition than us millennials. Millennials, I think we just so entrapped in technology. But what I see in the Gen Z generation in Europe and in the US, there is just so much nostalgia about having the clubs of old. People are starting to abandon dating apps even. They want
Yes.
real interaction and just like what like swiping left and right for 3 hours. I'd rather go to a bar and just deal with what I have at hand, you know?
Like the old days when
Yeah.
I was that age.
well, yeah, absolutely. Like when I met my wife, I profiled her with 2 psychometrics before proposing.
Yeah.
So, met at a social event, but then technologically enhanced. But and like after 10 years of knowing each other, I can say it's true what they say about marriage. It is psychological. One's a psycho, the other one's logical.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true in my house.
Yeah, as long
I'm
as
the
you stay
psycho.
over who's who, it's fine. If both partners say, "Well, I'm the logical one," you might have a little bit more to discuss.
I am not logical. Definitely, that's my husband's domain.
Well, Suzanne, I'm pretty sure you are logical, same as I am logical. It's just our own logics. So what's logical to
It's
us
just
is not
What
logical
it's
to you.
logical
different.
people say.
Yeah,
Yes, it's not
uh,
me, it's them.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh my goodness, they just don't understand how innovative I am. That's why I
Exactly.
always say, like, I love this
Are you an
concept.
Aquarius?
Me?
No, no, Nikita, are you Aquarius or Pisces?
What?
Perchance?
How can you not know me at all, Georgi? I'm a Leo, damn it.
Um,
Yeah, geez,
Just
Georgi,
do,
after
yeah,
everything we've been through. Yeah, and but
I know.
I'm a Cancerian myself.
Yeah, let's not go that rabbit.
yeah, but it's but
Sorry.
look, this is what's really kind of fun. It's actually fun to discuss this, and it's interesting. It has a degree of levity, and people who take sometimes personality models a bit too seriously, because a lot of these personality models tell you far more about the authors than it does about you or your client. And I think what's really important here, going back to Georgi's point about communities, is setting up your communities, such as I set up SciPub about 8 years ago, and I haven't looked back. So every month we meet and we talk about a contentious topic and get
Mm.
people with different opinions on it. And
It's so natural. I visited you in London, and I wish I can come more often. Although we have a direct flight from Pittsburgh to London,
oh, hey,
but just this plasticity of being like a little bit like I ask, what's your style of science? Of course, I don't believe in it. I'm a scientist, but you ask because you want to go out of your, rigid attitudes, like conceptions, and just have some silliness, some play. That's how you can go out of this. We as adults, but children have this all the time. In play, they reorganize the world, while we are so in our rules and like in also thinking how people perceive us, as Nikita said, instead of just asking them, what do you
yes,
think about me? We make theories and oh, you've been assuming all this time. Yeah,
yeah,
why didn't you just ask me?
Yeah.
So, so people have to just just sometimes allow themselves to be foolish, childish, playful, and explore what comes out of it. And it could be a great lead opportunity for tweaking yourself and developing it in a good way and just being open to experience. That's my derailer. I have the highest open experience and I love it. Yeah.
I
Nice.
think play is important. That's why I like storytelling. So a big part of my work is storytelling. And for me, that's once you convince people that it's not some childish thing that they should have left behind, people have so much fun with it and it makes change management a lot nicer.
Yeah, but to a large extent, our personality is the story we tell ourselves.
Exactly. I
Who
was
we
thinking
are.
that when, yeah, when you were saying, Georgi, about, do you make a story up about what we think people think about us? Well, it's that's what happens, isn't it?
I know this is what's really fascinating, and it's one of my favorite kind of psychology researchers and personality of 20th century, Allport. His work in Oddburst led to the Big Five 50 years later, and he used to say, if I want to know something about somebody, I ask them.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, but for some reason, us humans are fascinating. We much more rather go to Google and say, how do I manage an introverted colleague, rather than asking them, how would you
Yeah.
like to be managed?
Yes.
Or my favorite topic right now is micromanagement. It's so hot right now on LinkedIn. People say micromanagement is bad. Well, actually, it's usually a difference on openness and conscientiousness. People who are high openness might have felt micromanaged earlier in their career. So when they become leaders, they go, I will never do this to another human being for as long as I live. But their pragmatic colleagues might not see it as micromanagement. They just see it as management because they need more detail. And we never actually talk to each other about this. When we delegate, we don't ask a person to play back in their own words what exactly they're going to do. We just
Well, we
assume.
do. Like, I have to mention DDI. It's behind me, my
Oh,
employer.
really? I was wondering what
Oh,
that was. Uh,
just one thing. In our courses, we teach people when you start your leadership position, you have to know who you report, who you report to and who reports to you, like their motivations, their styles. It's like what Nikita said. I could be open. I am open to experience, and I do have micromanagement, and I do not micromanage my team, but I already have had exactly what Nikita said, like circumstances where someone said, "Well, I wish you could organize a little bit better my routine." It's like, what are you? It's like, you want me to micromanage me? They don't perceive it as micromanage, but you have to adjust to them. That's why leadership is hard. You have to adjust to people to motivate them better. But how can you do this if you are stuck being a micromanager or not? You have to be fluid. You have to do what is efficient sometimes. And what Hogan says, I don't care what you think about yourself. I care what your reputation is and what actually you do in life. Now that sounds very sad, right? We don't care what you think about yourself. In our book, we say, no, we care what you think about yourself, but it's somewhere in the middle. It's not either or. It's reputation and uh, your uh, inner core. Your Nikita, how do we say the inner side? Reputation versus?
well, it's, I would say it's what you do too much. And reputation is based on people's interpretation of what you do. As the wonderful author Kurt Vonnegut used to say, we are what we pretend to be, so be really careful what you pretend to be. So, and because this is what's really interesting is, people often say, oh, they try to be more extroverted at work, and it's exhausting. And they get really ticked off that their colleagues keep inviting them to the pub after work. Well, did you consider that they might see you as an extrovert, that they think you might actually enjoy it? And they go, oh, I didn't think about that. Or, if people suppress their toughness and their drive and try to be really nice to people, that's also not sustainable. Going back to Georgi's point, that sometimes when we work on one personality trait, it might not be actually that sustainable. And my favorite is, of course, the inner critic. And which is assigned with neuroticism because it's like negative self-construct, you're really hard on yourself. So people who are high on this trait tend to experience the inner critic, imposter syndrome more often. But what's really good about having an imposter syndrome and an inner critic? you're unlikely to be a psychopath.
Okay.
Psychopaths don't have those, don't tend to.
Otherwise, they wouldn't do the things.
Well, potentially. So next time you're critical of yourself, you can always go, well, at least I'm not a psychopath. And I find this is much more productive than trying to suppress it, because if you go, I'm going to be less critical of yourself. Sure, Monday to Wednesday you can be, but Thursday, Friday, when you're tired, it comes back with a vengeance, and it goes, you can't even suppress me, so it has more ammunition to criticize you. So it's this kind of incremental changes, support of others, community, and the question is how we can bring out the best in each other and help each other change and grow and develop, rather than making assumptions about each other and go, I didn't expect you to do that, you didn't live up to my assumption of you, how dare you do this to me, which is...
It's all defense mechanism after all, which we project our fears into others and blame them for what we fear in ourselves and try to maybe change, but don't want to start it, or just try to put a big heavy lid on this part of ourselves. So I think if you don't have fear, if you have love in your life, less fear, more love, less judgment, perfect combination for personality change.
And a sprinkling of curiosity.
Yes, that is the key.
Exactly.
We are out of time. I can't believe it. I've so enjoyed this conversation. I could talk to the two of you for hours. You make a great double act. You really do. So your book is available now in the UK, but it's also now available in the US. Am I right?
Yes.
Yep, it is. And if anybody wants to geek out on personality psychometrics, always happy to chat.
Where can people find you if they want to find out more?
LinkedIn. I'm the only chief neuroticism officer on there. So many chief happiness officers running about. I thought somebody needs to fly the flag for negative emotional affect.
I'm in LinkedIn too, and we are gonna be at PsyOp conference in Denver this year. I'm doing a stand-up there, and hopefully I'll be able to come to London this year at least once. I travel a lot to Europe, so I really think we can write maybe a second book.
Ooh.
Oh.
I don't want to talk more about that.
Oh, jeez, you've been so mysterious, Georgi.
Yeah, just good thing.
Oh, we shall look forward to that. Nikita, Georgi, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure speaking to both of you.
Thank you, Susanne. Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Change Stories podcast. I love this conversation and I hope you did too. Thanks as ever to my wonderful guests and to Pete Morgan at Monkey Pants Productions for making the podcast sound amazing. If you want to find out more about this or any other episodes of Change Stories, go to www.changestories.co.uk, where you will find all the episodes and show notes. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate and review the Change Stories podcast on your podcast listening platform. And do please let me know if you have ideas or requests for future episodes. You can contact me and find out more about change and storytelling on my website, www.feldsparconsulting.com. Thanks again for joining in with the Change Stories conversation.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.